In this video, we're going to take a look at 10 matches that helped me progress to Legend rank in Season 10 of Go Battle League. And for this video, you can see the team we used on the left-hand side of the screen. Nidoqueen, Scrafty, and Umbreon, all XL. This is the same team that I used last season in Season 9 to hit Legend. And this team was pretty effective in the first half of the season. It got a little bit harder to use with the introduction of Wallrain because Nidoqueen loses to Wallrain pretty heavily, but it was still able to get me a lot of good wins and a pretty decent win rate. I hit Legend with a 74% win rate, playing exclusively the Ultra League, the Open Ultra League. So let's get right into these matches. To start off, we're met with a Talonflame lead. And what I like to do in this scenario is try to sneak in as many poison jabs as I can if the Talonflame sticks to going with the 3 incinerates and then 2 incinerates to double up on flame charges. You see here that I shielded both because I'm able to farm down and still maintain a half health Nidoqueen. This is important because if there is a Charmer in the back, you will automatically lose, so you need to maintain your Nidoqueen. And if you swap out into Umbreon into the Talonflame and then you get countered in the back because oftentimes Talonflame is paired with a fighter like an Obstagoon, you will lose switch and then they can align their Talonflame on your Scrafty later on, which results in a loss. So oftentimes I will go 2 shields down, which seems crazy, but it's not really that big a deal because what you have built into this team is debuffs and buffs, right? So are opponents really going to shield power-up punches? Probably not. Are they going to shield Poison Fangs? Maybe on the second or third one, but at that point you've debuffed them enough that if they're stuck in with their last Pokemon, they're stuck debuffed and then you can sweep up with Scrafty in the back. So the opponent saving shields, usually they don't have a Scrafty answer in the back if they're running a Talonflame, but just in case they do, like if they are running a Charmer or in this case a Cresselia, something that has a fairy type attack, you do need that contingency in the Nidoqueen to hopefully counter that potential backline Pokemon. So this match ended up being pretty straightforward. When the opponent brought in the Wallrain, I opted to switch into my safe swap in the Umbreon. This again can be pretty dicey because if they do have a Charmer in the back, like a Sylveon or a Clefable, what can happen is they can farm down a lot of energy against your Umbreon because Umbreon is so bulky, and then they have a potential Psychic or Psyshock to throw into your Nidoqueen, which will leave you in a very bad position because then they just continue to charm down your Scrafty after that. But if you can bait out the Charmer with the Umbreon, hopefully your Nidoqueen can survive a charge move, get off a Poison Fang, and deal a little bit of chip damage in addition to what the Umbreon dealt and take out the Charmer before they get to 2 charge moves and takes down your Nidoqueen, and then your Scrafty can usually mop up in the back. So I know it sounds very dicey, but that's generally the way that I play out the Talonflame matchup. Usually they don't have a Charmer in the back, but just to play safe, I do opt to save the Nidoqueen. And because Umbreon is such a neutral matchup against pretty much everything, even against Charmers you get off a lot of last resort damage, you can usually get things in a range where either Nidoqueen or Scrafty, because they complement each other so well, can mop up whatever's in the back combined. Another common thing you might see is Jellicent, which again Scrafty can deal with quite well. Alright, the second matchup is Trevenant. This seems very good for me because my entire team beats Trevenant, but the issue that you're gonna see with these kind of teams is obviously if they lead Trevenant, they're gonna have 2 dark counters in the back. And so what is my back line? It's double dark. So while this would seem like, oh, this is a great lead, should be an easy matchup, not the case. Escavalier is a big core breaker for this team. It beats everything on this team. I have to essentially try to get some damage off with the Earth Power, which I do. I am a shield down, but then I bring in the Scrafty because it's my best answer to the Escavalier. The Nidoqueen poison moves are double resisted. Umbreon just gets taken out quite heavily with the counters and the potential Mega Horn. Scrafty does take super effective still, but at least the counters are neutral, and with the power-up punches, you can deal a lot of damage back. So the opponent does let their Escavalier go down, which is really good for me. And I'm in a pretty commanding position at this point, right? Because I can now align my Umbreon to the Trevenant, which is really good. But the opponent has a Regirock in the back, and I make a misplay here by not swapping out immediately. For some reason I was like, oh, this could be the Regirock with Earthquake. I don't want to really bring in my Nidoqueen down a shield. But throwing that foul play was a big mistake. Because I should have saved it for either throwing it into a debuffed Regirock because the opponent is likely going to start using their shields or save it for one-shotting the Trevenant. So because of this, I'm going to put myself in a very awkward position. As expected, the opponent starts using their shields, and we are able to get off this Earth Power. Argument to be made that I probably just should have double baited, but the opponent is likely going to swap out anyway, so at least I burn both their shields. And the crappy part here is that I thought the match was over because of how much they overfarmed, but I'm going to actually opt to build up to like 100 energy, just farming down this Trevenant all the way, which I believe is the right play. But I'm going to take a lot of Seed Bomb damage, and so what this is actually going to do is put me in range of Stone Edge. And Stone Edge is a very low energy move. It's only 55 energy, and Regirock gets to it very, very quickly. So I thought like, oh, this is over because Regirock is going to win CMP. I'm going to need like 3 foul plays. So actually, going back to my previous point, maybe throwing the foul play didn't really matter because I ended up farming down the Trevenant anyways. However, yeah, it wouldn't have mattered because actually that probably was the right play. But what happened here is my opponent sneaks in, I think 1 or 2 lock-ons there between me throwing my 2 moves. And look at this, we CMP tie to the next move. If my opponent didn't sneak in those lock-ons between my moves, I might have actually won this game. So despite me having a pretty decent lead because my whole team pretty much does well against Trevenant, my backline was countered. Kind of, well, because Crafty can obviously beat the Regirock, but with Focus Blast, Regirock does a lot of damage to Scrafty still. But the Escavalier was a really hard thing to overcome. I can't stay in with the Nidoqueen, I can't bring in the Umbreon, so I have to use my Scrafty answer to take care of it. And then, yeah, I think it really came down to like the tightest of margins at the end there. Alright, in this next matchup, you can see that we're aligned our Nidoqueen with an Alolan Muff. This is a very good matchup for Nidoqueen because we double resist the Poison Jab damage. And so I'm just staying in here. The opponent burns both their shields, so obviously they don't want this Nidoqueen around. Will I double shield as well to keep the Nidoqueen healthy? Yes, I will. The opponent now swaps into their Scrafty, and at this point I think I'm going to throw this and then swap into my own Scrafty, having an advantage with the debuff applied to their Scrafty. So despite them being able to buff their attack first, the debuff does enough to keep me ahead in this matchup and come out on top. So pretty straightforward. The opponent sneaks in a counter there, not great, but it doesn't really matter too much, I don't think, because, let's see, do they get to another power-up punch? Yes, so it does end up making a difference. If they didn't sneak in that extra counter, they may not have gotten to that extra power-up punch. So it just gets me a little bit lower, which isn't great because now I'm in perfect range to get farmed down. However, I will do some decent damage to this Amok in the meantime. And because it is Poison Jab, you know, I can take a Dark Pulse, it's not the end of the world, and hopefully try to farm down this Amok. I should be able to survive another Dark Pulse, but I don't want to risk it, so I just throw the Poison Jab. Shields are down, and so what I'm anticipating is I'll just debuff whatever comes in, and then bring in my Umbreon. So it is an Obstagoon, which isn't great, so the opponent is running Double Fighter in the back. So obviously this counters my Umbreon quite heavily. I'm going to make the opponent burn their energy on my Nidoqueen because it doesn't serve any purpose at this point. Hopefully they don't get the boost, and they don't. And this allows me to bring in my Umbreon here, and I'm just looking to get off whatever damage I can before they're able to swap out and clear their debuff. Because this thing, while this is a bad matchup, Umbreon is so tanky, this basically will be in 2 last resort range. So I just need to land 2 last resorts. I get 1 off with the debuff. This will definitely put it into last resort range, even if they are able to swap out. So they try to catch, they fail. They're not going to be able to get to a move. Even if the Obstagoon has a move, I'll be able to survive another cross chop. And so this was still pretty straightforward. Staying in with the Nidoqueen was helpful because after the Poison Fang goes off to debuff the Obstagoon's attack, I want to continue to stay in, like I said, to make them throw their energy as well as get some extra damage with those Poison Jabs on the Obstagoon. Okay, so the next matchup here, we are in a Deoxys Lead. So Deoxys Lead usually means, again, they have double dark counters in the back. And this is actually not a good matchup. So Deoxys is a bit of a core breaker in the lead because can't really bring in the Scrafty. The counters do a lot of damage. Nidoqueen has a rough time because of the Psycho Boost. And so what ends up happening here is I debuff the Deoxys. They throw at 5 counters, which is their Psycho Boost, and then they can clear all of their debuffs, so their defense debuff from the Poison Fang and their attack debuffs from the Psycho Boost. That's why Deoxys is so good, is that you can just clear your debuffs. You only have to obviously worry about like Ghost and Dark in the lead. So they swap in the Wallrain, so this is great for me because I'm able to counter it down, and smartly they don't shield. And this is smart by the opponent because it does allow them to just farm down my Scrafty and bank on whatever they have in the back, which is going to be another dark counter for sure. And I'm a shield down, so this is not great. Now this match was winnable. Spoiler alert, I do lose this matchup. But they bring in the Steelix. And this threw me off so much. I was like, what do I do against this thing? And I'm like, okay, the Deoxys has a lot of energy. I need to save the Umbreon for the Deoxys, which actually maybe not. I could have maybe stayed in with the Umbreon against the Steelix and just kept the Nidoqueen for the Deoxys. I could survive a Psycho Boost. I go for the bait, which is what made me lose this game. If I go for Earth Power, I actually win this game. So the opponent is now going to save their shields for this Umbreon, shield up these foul plays because they are debuffed from the Poison Fang. And they're going to hit me with an Earthquake. I shield it, so that's good. Able to farm down the Deoxys, which is a misplay by the opponent, bringing that in, trying to catch or something. But they do clear their debuff off of the Steelix. And having a shield still, these Dragon Tails do a lot of damage to the Umbreon. Or not a lot, but they add up. And I'm like, I'm not going to be able to survive another Earthquake. And so if I didn't throw that foul play into the Steelix at the beginning, before I swapped back into the Nidoqueen, or potentially played it different and just stayed in with the Umbreon, or I did not bait with the Poison Fang and just threw the Earth Power, I would have won this match. And it was still really close because I was almost at my next foul play. So a lot of mistakes on my end during that matchup, which showed that that match was still winnable, just a lot of misplays by me, and deservedly lost. So learn from that and move on to the next one. Cresselia leads are a bit tough because usually if Cresselia is in the lead, they are running Future Sight and Moonblast. They are not running Grass Knot, and the reason for that is because they need answers against Talonflame. So anticipating that, I swap on the 8th Psycho Cut to catch a Future Sight, which I successfully do, and that's good. You don't want to go into your direct hard counter, but my opponent is debuffed from a Poison Fang, and so I'm going to shield up this Moonblast because it would KO me at this point. But the next Moonblast, it'll only need 6 to get to. So they're going to shield up my foul play. That's fine. They're going to get to their Moonblast first. But for some reason they don't throw. So I'm able to get to another foul play. And remember, the opponent is debuffed, which I think they forgot. And so look how low it gets their Cresselia. So at this point, I'm like, all right, I'll just double shield because they've already burned 1 shield. And I can keep my Scrafty very healthy, counter down if they want. But I knew they were going to switch. And so I opt to switch in my Nidoqueen to easily get a health advantage on, or sorry, a farm down advantage on the Cresselia, or catch whatever they swap in. They swap in a Talonflame, and this is good because I want to line up the Talonflame on my Nidoqueen. Totally fine if they throw a Brave Bird here because I'm going to be able to bring in my Scrafty and farm down with the triple debuff, or I think now, well, obviously it's like 5 times debuffed because 2 Poison Fangs plus a Brave Bird. And it can only be a maximum of 4 times debuffed, so this thing is maximally debuffed. They're only going to get off 1 Incinerate's worth of damage, and I have a lot of energy on my Scrafty. Seeing what they have in the back, it is a Swampert, so thank goodness my Nidoqueen was able to avoid that. Nidoqueen kind of had to be lined up with the Talonflame, and thankfully it was, because it's potentially had a losing matchup against Cresselia if it was able to land a Future Sight, and obviously it has a very bad matchup against Swampert. And so at this point, I'm feeling pretty comfortable getting a lot of counter damage off on this Swampert. This Hydro Cannon, even if it didn't take me out, or if it did take me out, it wouldn't have mattered because I was simultaneously swapping anyways. And the opponent makes a mistake swapping into their Cresselia, giving me extra farm. There's no way the Swampert can deal enough damage before I can get to 2 foul plays. So I just build up to back-to-back foul plays and burn 1 shield with 1 and take the match with the second. But my opponent knows the game is over, so they just don't even bother shielding, taking the foul play and allowing us to win. So at this point we were doing really well. I think we were like 200 and some matches in. But the next day when I was playing, I think I noticed that this team, I was getting into a lot of like Charmers in the back, you know, like just getting hard countered. What was it, like Alolan Ninetales in the back with Charm, and like Shadow Granbull's in the back, like double Charmers in the back. And so I opted to give myself a little bit more flexibility by switching out the Umbreon for the Greedent, which gives me the same coverage more or less because it has normal and dark type charge moves, but it gives me a little bit more flexibility against Swampert with the Bullet Seed because it does double super effective, and I'm not necessarily super weak to Charm. And so this team actually worked out really well, and this is the set that this is the set to Legend, and this is the first time I tried this team composition out. So I got back up in the rating, I think to 2960 something, and I was like, okay, I need a 4-1. Let me try swapping out the Umbreon for the Greedent. And so I did, and in this first matchup, of course, we're met with something that the Umbreon would absolutely decimate in the Gengar. But Greedent can still do some decent work against Gengar as well, obviously, because it double resists the Shadow Claws. But we win switch on a Machamp because my opponent made a mistake in staying in too long with the Gengar, allowing me to build up enough energy on the Scrafty to buff my attack and kind of keep pace with the Machamp's counters. And because Scrafty is so bulky and Shadow Machamp is more glassy, I am able to win that on even shields, more or less. So my opponent is going to get to double Sludge Bombs, which is going to get my Greedent very low. I can't shield anything because I need to bank on my Nidoqueen, clearing out whatever's in the back. Thankfully, it's a Talonflame. Make a huge mistake there by letting my opponent get in an extra Incinerate. But overall, I don't think it should be a big deal because I have energy stored on my Greedent, but it definitely could have been a big deal. So my opponent is going to be able to farm me down, which isn't great. Most likely they're going to burn their last shield here because they want to throw another Brave Bird into my Greedent. So I'm able to sneak in a Bullet Seed. My opponent throws a Flame Charge. I don't know if that Incinerate registers. I think it registers on the 5th turn because it's a 5-turn move. So I don't think the Incinerate registered because my move is a 3-turn move before I throw the Charge move, which might account for 1 turn as well, so like 4 turns. And so the Incinerate doesn't actually get to the 5th turn to register before the Talonflame gets KO'd. And because that Incinerate damage doesn't register, the Shadow Punch only does about 7% to Greedent. I'm able to survive it, get off my Crunch. I believe that was a Crunch and not a Body Slam, but I'm able to get off my move and take that match barely. So really close match, but was able to take it in the end, so really exciting. Alright, Meganium Lead. Never seen this before, but I'm like, I'll take it because coming by positive leads with Nidoqueen is very tough. Usually in the lower ranks, like maybe in like the 28s to 2950s, you're encountering a lot of like Obstagoon, Scrafty, even Galvantula leads, which all are great for Nidoqueen. But in these upper ranks, you were definitely encountering way more Swamperts, Wallrains, Giratinas for some reason, and Jellicents, which all beat Nidoqueen. Except for Dragon Breath Giratina. In the Zero Shield, going double Earth Power, Nidoqueen can win switch there against the Giratina. But that's why I ended up dropping rating again after getting to 2990, is because I was getting hard countered in the lead and the opponents were running like Wallrains with like Charmers in the back, Swamperts with Charmers in the back, and so like my Umbreon and Scrafties were getting just like decimated. So I ended up sticking with it because I'm like, this team got me this far, it got me to Legend in rank, or in Season 9, let me just stick with it and see what I can do. So the opponent brings in a Charizard, and I'm like, whenever you see a Charizard swap in, usually you can bank on there being a Talonflame in the back, and so I kind of had that in mind. I'm like, is this going to be like Meganium double fire? And sure enough, it is. And so I opt to bring in my Nidoqueen because I want to force the opponent to swap and lock in their Talonflame so I can debuff it, because my Scrafty has almost no chance against this Talonflame. I have to save my shields for the Scrafty at this point. But I have the debuff off, one debuff off on the Talonflame. And so these counters, despite being resisted, still do a lot of damage. And I'm going to actually go for a bait here, which is a huge mistake because I should just go double Foul Play. But the opponent shields, and I just have a double shield on my Scrafty, and I should win. I don't think they're at a Frenzy Plant, but the opponent goes Brave Bird, and I believe they're still switch locked, so they're like quad debuff now at this point, and so the opponent realizes that and concedes the match. So the play there was throwing foul play, because if the opponent, well, the opponent kind of has to shield, I guess, which is why I went for the bait. But if they end up no shielding, because that's like their win condition, is if I bait and they don't shield, you know, they bait the next one, or sorry, they shield the next one, which is most likely the foul play, and then they just swap out and clear their debuff with stored energy on the Talonflame. But I think I would be able to counter down the Meganium anyways and throw more energy into the Talonflame, and at that point a foul play should have KO'd anyways, whether the Talonflame was debuffed or not, so shouldn't have mattered. I didn't actually catch the lead on this one, but my opponent swaps in a Drapion, and I learned from this one that you actually just want to bait. So I stay in and I throw the Earth Power, which is really stupid. I should have just thrown the Poison Fang and then swapped. But my opponent is down a shield at this point. I have taken an Aqua Tail with my Nidoqueen, which isn't great. But I figured I'm pretty comfortable here because Scrafty has a pretty decent matchup against Drapion. But again, because I was so late on the swap, my opponent's going to take advantage. And I think I don't let my Scrafty go. They bait me with Grass Knot. That's really bad. Was I not counting? Or maybe they did get to 7 Psycho Cuts. My opponent doesn't shield. I'm bringing in the Greedent at this point, which is my answer to the Psychic types, right? Because again, it's supposed to act as the Umbreon coverage, or the same coverage as Umbreon. And I'm going to take these Grass Knots, or they go for Moonblast here, building up a lot of energy, going for the Crunch. I don't think they swapped. No, they let their Cresselia go down, and they have a Stunfisk in the back. So this is rough. Thinking back, I make a play here to catch, basically stacking my Nidoqueen. I don't know if this was the right play, but I'm basically thinking like, okay, my Scrafty has to do everything, right? Like it has to take out the Drapion, it has to take out this Stunfisk. The Mud Shots do very little damage. My opponent CMP ties with me here, and I'm not expecting them to shield us, but they do. And they're getting off just a tad bit of extra energy here, and I'm like, okay, well, obviously I have to shield this now, which is arguably a mistake. I probably should have saved the shield for the Greedent, because what am I going to really do here? Get off a Power Punch worth of damage and like a counter, which is going to allow my opponent to also farm down. I swap and I make another mistake here. So the timer came up and I realized this after I clicked on the Crunch. I could have just went for double Body Slam and ran the timer out and won with my 2 Pokemon to 1 advantage, and even a health advantage because my opponent wouldn't have got off this Earthquake, because they get their Mud Shot through as I'm getting the energy for the Body Slam. If I would have thrown double Body Slam, I would have, the opponent, even if they would have snuck in a Mud Shot, wouldn't have been able to activate their Earthquake, and I would have taken that match on time. So again, misplay by me. All right, negative lead, Wallrain. This is pretty common up in these upper ranks. Safe swap in the Greedent, which has a good matchup against Wallrain. Obviously, the Scrafty does as well. But when the opponent stays in and weakens up, softens up the Greedent, it means that they don't have a direct answer. They need to soften it up first. So they're staying in here. The switch clocks are misaligned. Doesn't really matter though, because even if you bring back in the Nidoqueen, because you have like half the time of your switch clock difference between you and your opponent, the opponent just swaps in their Wallrain anyways, and then you're stuck in for another half cycle of a switch clock timer, where they have a positive matchup with their Wallrain against your Nidoqueen. So it's very rough. It's very easy for them to manipulate and keep switch advantage. But we're going to do as much damage as we can, and I actually opt at this point to just like sack the Nidoqueen. So I catch the Acid Sprite, which is really good for me. And at this point, I'm like, all right, let me just farm this all the way down and then throw an Earth Power into the Wallrain. So at this point, my Nidoqueen is just sacked. And this isn't great, because usually if they lead Wallrain, they have answers to Scrafty in the back. Muck isn't really an answer to a fighter, so I'm expecting like a Charmer in the back, and I'm like, this is probably over. I'm going to lose this. Opponent takes out the Nidoqueen, but we do land a lot of damage, so they have 2 Pokemon really low. And I'm like, Scrafty, they got to have a Scrafty answer, right? They don't, and they actually end up conceding the match. So yeah, we were able to take that one, which is crazy to me because, yeah, you do see a lot of Wallrains with Charmers in the back. And then I'm like, okay, I'm 3-1, right? Could have been 4-1 or 4-0 if I just took the matchup with going to time. But I'm like, all right, Alex, this has to be my positive match. They lead with Scrafty, good matchup for me. They bring in a Nidoqueen, which is very awkward. Build up to the Earth Power, throw the Poison Jab. Perfect scenario for me, able to debuff this Nidoqueen, bring in my Greedent. However, our switch clocks are misaligned. And so without a doubt, my opponent is going to be planning to bring back in that Scrafty on a potentially double or triple debuffed Greedent. So what I need to do is be able to build up to back-to-back body slams in order to stall the clock out when the opponent switches. So I'm just throwing as much bullet seeds as I can. I'm going to shield up this next Poison Fang to keep my Greedent alive. For some reason, the overtap registers. Once I build up the back-to-back, I tried to click on the body slam, but it didn't register because the Nidoqueen was still stuck in and their timer was up, my timer was coming up. So I could actually throw the body slam on the Nidoqueen and prevent them from gaining the switch clock advantage, because if they try to switch after I threw the body slam, my switch timer would have been up and I could have switched off as well. But they're able to get their switch off, and then for some reason I'm still throwing bullet seeds and I'm tapping on the body slam. They're able to get off a few counters, which do a lot of damage to my Greedent, but we're able to survive. I think we still have a move stored as well on the Greedent, but at this point I'm willing to let the Nidoqueen go down, bring back in my Greedent, and throw the stored body slam to get there. Nidoqueen very low, very unlikely to shield. Now the problem is with Scrafty in the lead, they might have a fighting answer in the back, but I'm hoping they don't. We're able to get to this next body slam, which doesn't really matter because I'm going to simultaneously swap. But they have a Cofagrigus, which is just insane to me. So thankfully, I guess this is technically a fighting answer, right? Which is what I said earlier, because if the opponent has like a Farfetch'd or a Surfetch'd or a Machamp or an Obstagoon obviously would beat this, but yeah, it doesn't beat Obstagoon or Scrafty. So we're able to take that match. Alex sees the writing on the wall, concedes the match, and we're able to go 4-1 with the Nidoqueen Double Dark and Nidoqueen Dark Normal variation to hit Legend with a 74% win percentage. So that is my Season 10 run. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments if there's anything you would like to see, but thank you for watching. Quantum is out.